Ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
There's probably one of the stories that makes a lot of sense here, and we've talked about before, is the thing about Leonardo and how he didn't paint clouds because he really loved to paint clouds or he wanted to make amazing clouds. He was also a scientist. He really wanted to know how they worked, right? Like to get at what they were. And part of his way of learning was not only just researching and doing experiments, but also creating some art and creating something that people could engage with and see if it made sense to them.
hmm Yeah, I mean, Leonardo is another good example because he is quite literally the Renaissance man, and he does a lot of things, right? And I think one of the things that we've realized over working with design is it's probably best not working with designers,
Yeah.
and that if we're really going to tackle complex issues like we want to, we have to work with a really big distributed team of people who have different expertise, right? But it's also interesting because though that reinforces design, it also reinforces our notion of betterment, because the more people that you work with, the more values are there, the more consideration you do for different parts of the population. So it's nice to see how those different expertise reinforce like our core purpose, which is betterment work.
And the two ways that really manifests itself, like the client work, in terms of choosing client work that is already striving towards betterment, clients who are doing something really interesting that we could never do, that is they're already really far down the path and just really need a little bit of help getting like a little bit further, and can use the expertise that we have and sort of the collaboration to create something different in their particular problem space and hopefully get to a result that hasn't been there before. And then the other side, which is just ideas for initiatives that and ventures that actually create betterment just on their own because we haven't seen a group doing it very well or haven't been able to find a partner, or it's just a new thing in general. So those two sides of our work, the initiative stream and the client driven work.
Yeah, and I mean, traditionally, or in a traditional studio, you don't see those endeavors as much. Like you see a lot of engineers or business students going out and starting their own thing, and it seems as designers, we've talked about this before, they really like to work on other people's stuff, and that might not be because they like it, but because they're really afraid to work on their own things. And maybe it's about drive, and maybe it's about needing a client for direction, but really, I think part of what we're looking at is how to put design at the center of those types of endeavors, and how to do that in a distributed way too.
And starting to understand, if design's at the center, what goes around it, and what else do you need to actually make a venture succeed. And these are things that, it would be nice if we learned in design school, but we really didn't, right? Like we'd have to learn those things on our own, or from the people who we've been working with. And this is where the knowledge transfer becomes really valuable. Where if we were just working on initiatives, we wouldn't be learning from people who are already succeeding at initiatives, right?
And maybe it's not design at the center, but design as like blood that's flowing through these things, because it seems that design is often forgotten. But another thing about design is we talk about betterment in design, the notion of doing something that's socially good, and design for a lot of people doesn't mesh, but it seems that design thinks about context. And if you think about a broader and broader context, you'll get to the point where, what you're working on is bettering humanity. That's ultimately the essence of what design is for. So it seems a bit tricky that hasn't happened in the design world.
And it feels like there might be a few really obvious reasons why, and one is, often the context that you're limited to sometimes by a client is the edges of the client's sort of sphere of interest or sphere of how they see the problem. And even though you've discovered a larger context, since they're ultimately writing the check, it's sometimes difficult for you to actually engage the rest of that context, right? And actually take it into consideration. Because who knows, it might end up being 10 times the biggest job as you expected in the beginning, and that's going to create a problem given the way that the design business works.
Right. Yeah, the most effective designers that I've met have always said, a client hires me for one thing and I do another. And so, I think that's what we're working towards is instead of selling that artifact or that end product, it's selling the process of getting there, and really opening those other opportunities that came along the way. Really looking at the context of the problem and where it fits in society, and selling that process as the primary piece, and the artifact being a secondary outcome.
And it's strange too, because so much of design actually, of what people think of it, is a very, tactile, true to life artifact type thing. Something you can actually see and wrap your hands around and look at and say, oh, this is what you did, right?
Okay.
And miss the whole back end of it and this whole process of discovery and many of the things that
Nice.
piece is actually, I guess, adding to in a lot of other ways and what it's
Lead them in, I
accomplishing,
guess.
other than just, the colors and the
Don't look better
typefaces
than
and
that, so.
the clever words that were chosen.
Yeah, I think the most valuable thing that we've added to our clients, businesses, is giving them a way to think about their problems that they weren't thinking about it before. And, definitely they get some artifacts that look nice or, a website that works, but really it's about giving them the tools to understand problems differently or look at the context in a bigger way.
And the clients who we've made happiest in the past were the ones who definitely were excited to look at things in a new way and excited to take on that challenge of saying, oh, actually, you know what? We weren't wrong, but we weren't right either. And that's kind of what design is all about, realizing that, you got to keep trying things.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me of our friend's, observation, and he says companies have outsourced everything, including their thinking. And that it
Right.
seems like when people come to a design firm or an advertising firm or marketing firm, they're really outsourcing their thinking, which is really the only thing that puts them in business in the first place. So it's about trying to get that back.
About companies outsourcing their thinking.
Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about.
I think this is actually a good space to talk about some of the things that are really nice to see in a final piece, like in a successful design initiative or a successful design engagement. What happens, right?
In a successful design engagement, what happens?
Yeah, like what do you think, or like what do you get out of it? What do clients get?
Well, I think that we offer some insight. I think that we learn a lot about a really interesting area. And I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, we feel like we have affected people positively rather than negatively.
So people, you mean clients, or you mean?
I think we mean society, like permanently, or at least for a long time, have made an impact. So, but I think it's tricky because we often talk about betterment and the systems thinking and the larger issue at hand. Because that's important to us. That's something that drives us, and because traditionally design is not looked at like that. But I think it's really important to note that we care very much about the very simple things and the aesthetics of things and how things are arranged, and that's something we're very in tune with.
Yeah, and I think there's a tendency to believe that, because, there's this focus on the minutia, the focus on, one pixel, that there can't be this focus on a larger scale as well. And also, there's no way that there could be an effect on the larger scale, right? And there's these sort of layers that add into this, the layer of, quality, well-crafted, formal design, like right down at the bottom, the messaging, moving right up to like the actual purpose of the project and who it's going to be working with at the end,
Yeah. And I guess like to highlight that, I just right now posted on a forum to bring the tabs in Safari back to the top. And I mean, most people wouldn't care where the tabs are, but for me, it's a really important thing. And I think we have this, obsession with making things better, whether it's a really small thing or a really big thing. If we can affect it, then we generally try to.
Yeah, there's something so satisfying about making things better at every scale, and you can see them really quickly. I think that it's actually a really nice translation between wanting to make things better overall and wanting to make things better with something really tangible. Oh, I moved this to the left and now it looks better, right? And it's like, it's the same feeling that you get from both. It's just one you get right away and one you get over a lifetime of work.
Right.
Or maybe over, I hope, more often than a lifetime, but...
And I guess the tricky thing is, too, you can make things better on the small scale, but if you're not thinking about the good scale, you could be making them worse overall, right?
True,
so
yeah.
you could be working all day, making sweet ads for cigarette companies. And, though you're making the ads better,